Is leadership quality a big thing about military?
Everyone is a leader. It doesn't matter what rank you are, and that's what they really instill into you. There's a stereotype that veterans, we all have PTSD, we're on antidepressants, and we, can't do anything. It hasn't held me back. There's 60 plus jobs in the Air Force. Only one has been a pilot. There's so much more to Air Force than just being in a plane.
Decision making at this stage would be so crucial, right? How do you know that you're doing the right thing? Welcome to an episode of Bridging Cultures and Honoring Veterans, a Tawassul Foundation project. We're interviewed by Humans of Australia. This is all about celebrating stories of Australian veterans and sharing them with multicultural communities, helping us to appreciate the service, sacrifice, and humanity behind the uniform. In each episode, we sit down with veterans and community leaders to explore their journeys, experiences, and reflections, highlighting the shared values that unite us as Australians. And today we are in conversation with Shamsa, a second generation Australian with a Palestinian background who served in the Air Force for 14 years and continues to work part time. Hi, Shamsa, and welcome to our podcast. We're honored to have you as we are a multicultural organization and are excited to learn more about your service to Australia.
So much for having me, Sarah.
How now we're going to go directly into the questions because I'm super excited and I'm so sure our listeners are also really excited. I want to know, how did you get into the Air Force or the Defense of Australia? What was your childhood like and was it always your dream?
It wasn't always my dream to be in the military. I didn't really know much about the military, really, but my boyfriend at the time had joined and he said, if you sign up to the Air Force, they'll pay for your degree. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds good. I had a I had a university debt, so I switched my degree from media and marketing across to business, and then joined up on a scholarship as a logistics officer. I didn't really know what logistics was. I didn't know much about the Air Force, but it turned into a beautiful, 14-year career that's still going.
So, how old were you when you joined?
So I was at university when I was 16. So I joined just after my 17th birthday at the end of my first year of university.
Wow, you were like in your late teenage years and you made such a big decision. Was it easy for you to make that decision?
When you're 17, you're just going with the flow, you're just taking opportunities, and that's kind of been a mantra for my life, to say yes to all the great opportunities. I thought maybe I'll get my degree paid for and be in for a few years, and I didn't realize that it would turn into the first chapter of my career.
Wow. People usually in their teenagers are like figuring out what to do, exploring themselves. Here you took a big stand for yourself. So how was it when you joined is it the military or the Air Force? What would I call it? What's the right term?
Well, I mean, Sarah, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. We're all still discovering that. But yeah, I joined the Air Force, which is part of the Australian Defence Force. So, other countries have lots of different branches. We just have Army, Navy, and Air Force. And I just thought I'll just go on this adventure and see what happens.
And what were your first few years like when you joined? Because when I usually think of the army, it's like rigorous training, it's like all those physical things that you see in movies, you're training to be those fit people and those obstacles. Is it actually like that? Or, but you said you were a part of logistics. Can you take me through it?
Yeah, I know. I don't look like a bodybuilder. I mean, the stereotype that you have to be super fit and you're just getting yelled at is probably just like the movies. My first few years were very normal. I was just at university, studying while they paid for it. And then I went through officer training in the Air Force. And then I very quickly found myself, deployed all around the world. And I was deployed for my 21st, 22nd, and 24th birthdays. The training is hard, but it's world class, and the leadership experience I got at such a young age has really set me up for the future.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's not like the movies, just to clarify it again.
Honestly, there is a bit of yelling, but it's just all during your initial training. I think the military, people think that veterans are only good at yelling at each other, but that's not the case. It's actually really sophisticated leadership skills that you have to be able to lead people through some of the situations that we find ourselves in.
Oh, interesting. And were you always sure that you wanted to join the logistics team, or it's through the training that you learn that, oh, logistics is the part that I want to be a part of?
No, I didn't even really know what logistics was. I just signed up because that was the opportunity I had and it sounded cool. And then as I got to learn, I thought, wow, I think during COVID, we learned a lot about global supply chains. And, when a ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal and it turns off the world, we realize how important it is to move things and people all around the world. And logistics it covers so many things. It's supply chain, it's warehousing, it's contracts, it's acquisition, it's sustainment of platforms. So I realized how important supply chains are. And even though I'm not in logistics in a primary role anymore, I those the skills I've learned around project management and moving things and people around the globe have carried through to all the work that I've done since.
Okay, that's amazing. So then once you joined and you finished university and your officer training and you joined the logistics team, you said you became a leader, right?
Yeah, so I became a flying officer in the Air Force when I was 18. So my first unit was a expeditionary combat support squadron, so a squadron that would fly around the world and set up and pack up airfields. It's funny when you think about it because you're so young and you're leading these teams that have been in the Air Force longer than I've been alive in some cases, and so there's this really beautiful balance of how do you lead technical teams that know their job really, really well. What value could I possibly add as a little university graduate, 20-year-old flying officer in the Air Force, and then you find out that your role is to connect the strategic and the tactical and provide coverage and support to your team so they can get the job done.
And so then how was your experience leading at such a young age and becoming a leader?
I think the most important thing I learned was humility and curiosity, and they're the two leadership traits I've taken through with me for my whole career. I'm constantly in situations where I'm not the smartest in the room. My team are far more technical than I am, but if I bring humility and curiosity to that and say, hey, I don't know, how to run this warehouse, but I do know how to protect my team, and I do know how to remove barriers for you, and I do know how to stand up for you in the strategic environment. I've also had the opportunity to witness really good and really bad leadership from above and below me, and so that's helped shape the kind of leader I want to be. So I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I'd gone straight into corporate, I think.
Yeah, it sounds so amazing that you were with the smartest people. And I've heard this saying that you should always be in a room full of the smartest people. So there's so much more to learn. And that's what I think the case was for you.
Yeah, I think that leaders don't have to be the technical experts. Leadership is a totally different skill set, and that's something that we notice. If people are really good at their technical job and they can suddenly find themselves in middle management and they haven't been developed as a leader, it's like, yeah, you're a really good accountant, but it doesn't mean that you can lead, a team of other accountants. And so I think what the military does really well is that you're a leader first, you're a logistician second. Your primary role is to lead and care for your team and achieve the mission. And your secondary role is, to be that technical expert. You still have to know your stuff because the leaders above you are relying on you to make decisions. But if you build trust in your teams, then they're going to support you.
Decision making at this stage would be so crucial, right? Because if one wrong decision, a lot of things can go wrong. So how do you know, and that also is at a young age, how do you know that you're doing the right thing, or it's the people around you that give you that confidence?
Yeah, the military is really good at this because we have, doctrine and policy, but we also exercise a lot. So we do a lot of training. We repeat the situations over and over. So when you're doing it for real, you kind of know the risks and what can go right and wrong. And they give you the confidence so that when you have to make an immediate decision and you've got to go through that immediate decision making process, you can trust yourself because it's second nature to you.
This sounds like, how lawyers have the mock trials before they actually go in front of a judge. It's like training and creating scenarios before they can actually come. Is it so?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's interesting. So you are, trained for the day, and if anything comes up, and I'm so sure you're trained for the best and the worst case scenarios.
Yeah, and there's lots of things you can't train yourself for. There's lots of situations I found myself in overseas where I went, "How on earth did I end up in this situation?" But I just rely on my training and the people around me to get me through, and realizing you're just taking the ego out of it. That it's not actually about you; it's about your team, and just trusting that they're going to have your back as well, which I think the military does really well.
Yep. So is leadership quality a big thing about military?
Yeah, well, like I said, you're a leader first, you're an officer first. Whether you join up as enlisted, which is, sergeants and corporals and that side of the house, everyone is a leader. It doesn't matter what rank you are, and that's what they really instill into you. And I think they really instill values like integrity, which is doing the right thing when no one's looking. So how do we create a culture where everyone stands up for what's right, calls out what they see it. And like militaries around the world and the Australian Defence Force haven't always got that right. And so the most important thing is making sure that we're building a culture where it's safe to speak out, and most importantly, that people are going to do the right thing all the time.
Okay, that's really interesting. And it sounds like talking to you, being a part of the military sounds like, you're inculcating yourself with a lot of integrity and teamwork. So as when you grew with your career in the military, what was it like? Because I've heard that you do move around a lot. Was that the case for you? And where all did you move?
I think that's one of the draw cards for a lot of people. They want to see the country, they want to see the world, they want to work with different cultures. So I've worked with, I think, 19 different countries, nations, militaries, all their contracted personnel. And that's been the absolute highlight. And now that I am a mum and I do have children, as they get older, you want a bit more stability for them. But I gave birth to my first child in Queensland, my second one in Adelaide, and then we lived in Canberra, and then I've deployed all over the world as well. And I've absolutely loved that because it's given me a cultural acumen that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And I think that's why, you know, our defence force is so much stronger by having migrants who join, because they also bring that cultural lens from their own experiences as well.
So you were a migrant. Were there more migrants around you in the department that you were?
Yeah, I mean, I'm second generation, but my Palestinian heritage is really important to me. Um, there is there is cultural diversity in the military. There's gender diversity, the sexuality, diversity, but it's not. It's something that's definitely been worked on over the last few decades. So I found my groove really in the gender space and the intersectional feminism space. So it was really important to me to make sure that women and gender peace and security was being focused on, and then on top of that, that it wasn't just white women or Australian women, that we're actually looking at the intersectionality, because I think that women from different cultures, when we come together, oh my goodness, we're so powerful. And that's certainly the case with the women that I've worked with from other militaries around the world as well. I think there's this kind of sisterhood when you meet a female that's serving, no matter what country she's serving with, because you've kind of gone through the same stuff. So there definitely is cultural diversity, and a lot of people don't realise that the family that has sent the most sons and daughters to war is actually an Aboriginal family, the Lovett family.
Okay.
And so we have, a really beautiful Aboriginal story in our Australian Defence Force as well.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'd never heard of this, and I don't know, people don't talk about this. Why is this not out there?
Well, I mean, the Aboriginal story is really interesting, and if you've done your citizenship test, you probably know more about Indigenous Australia than most Australians, because for so long, it wasn't taught in school, and it's getting better. But what's really interesting about the Aboriginal story about the Lovett family is that they sent their sons and daughters into World War One and World War Two, and when they came back from World War One, they weren't even allowed into the RSL pub to have a beer with their soldier mates. And to the fact even that the Lovett family had their land taken off them and given to other soldiers under the soldier settlement scheme. So while Australia was still not recognising Aboriginal Australians and the value that they brought to our country. They were serving their nation overseas, and I think that that's such a humble and gracious act. And so we're super grateful for our Aboriginal veterans who, even when they weren't recognised by their own country, were still serving them, overseas as Anzacs and into World War II and beyond.
You just mentioned Anzac right now. What does Anzac Day mean, actually? And what does it mean to you?
Yeah, Anzac Day is I think it's changing the way that people recognize it. It's not what it's not is a day for celebration and glorification of war. It's not. It's a day of commemoration. Anzac Day recognizes a specific battle that happened in World War One, but it's grown to kind of reflect the Australian values of courage and mateship and camaraderie. Anzac Day itself is a multicultural day. It's the Australian and the New Zealand Army Corps. That's what Anzac stands for, coming together working in a coalition in World War One. I think it's a day of reflection, of recognising the horrors of war, the senselessness of war, and making sure that we don't end up in that space again. And we did, a couple of decades later, we're in World War II. And I think that now more than ever, Anzac Day to me is a day of peace building, and how do I live a life that brings the world around me closer to peace. And I think that it's become a lot more multicultural in the past few years, I've noticed. And it's definitely a day, of reflection for me.
I agree. It has become multicultural, but there's so much more to learn. I'm so glad I'm having this conversation with you so that I can get to know more about Anzac Day. And I am glad that the listeners can also get to know so much more about Anzac Day, because it's much more deeper than just what happens on that particular day. So on that, I want to know, how can multicultural people or people of multicultural backgrounds, how can they be involved with the Anzac Day? Is there a way that they can feel a part of it, who are not a part of the defense or the army?
Yeah, and it's a broader question about how can people who aren't veterans feel connected to what Anzac Day is trying to represent. And I think it's about what it represents for you. If you've migrated, especially because of war, because of conflict, whether that's internal or war has been thrust upon you, it's just a reflection of, okay, like, I'm here in this beautiful country now. How can my life be about peace, and how can I enjoy everything that Australia has to offer me and that I bring to Australia? And I think that there's something really powerful when we all come together. The original Australian culture is Aboriginal Australians. Everyone else has come here from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we've all come to this beautiful country, whether it was hundreds of years ago or last year. And so how do we sort of all come together, and how do we hold ourselves to account as a nation in our region? How do we maintain, being a peace building nation? And, the military has lots of different connotations for lots of different people. And in some cultures, the military doesn't have good connotations. But I think removing that and focusing on the values around camaraderie, mateship, and courage, and how do I bring them into my everyday life, I think is the best way to reflect on Anzac Day.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's a great way to feel Australian, through that day, and to be a part of Australia through these small things, which mean a lot to Australia in a way. Yep.
Yeah.
I actually am very curious. I know we've come way ahead, but I want to know, you did mention that you traveled all around the globe as well and work with people of different cultures. Where all did you get deployed?
So, my 21st birthday, I was in Manus Island, so in Papua New Guinea, and that was very challenging. How do you lead a whole bunch of people to build a detention centre? How do you deal with the potential moral injury that causes? And how do you remember that in the military you're apolitical and it's your job to serve the government of the day? And so that taught me a lot. That taught me a lot around my own boundaries and morals, and how I lead teams. My 22nd birthday, I was in Afghanistan in Uruzgan province, and we were preparing for the handover, the transfer of authority over to the Afghan government of our Air Force base, well, our multinational base. That was incredible. I was working directly with 30 plus Afghan men, and I loved the Afghan culture. I loved being in the desert with them and sharing Ramadan with them, and just being surrounded by humans that really wanted the best for their country. And then my 24th birthday, I was back in the Middle East, and I was supporting our KC-30, which in the Air Force is our air-to-air refueler. So we can refuel jets in the air without them having to land. It's kind of like a flying petrol station.
Wow,
And
that sounds
it was
cool.
my job to make sure that aircraft was working and had everything it needed so it could refuel our Australian jets. So I feel very grateful to have had 3 very different deployments that showed me 3 different kinds of aspects of logistics in the Air Force and cultures as well.
Wow, at such a young age, you traveled and around the globe. Was it daunting for you? Because these are some heavy, intense scenarios that you did mention. These are not easy everyday life corporate things where you're just making a decision and it's consulting. These are bigger consulting choices. You're serving the nation. Was it daunting? And you were just 21, 22, 24. People are studying yet their master's degree till they're like 25, I think. So I think I was when I was 23. So how was that for you?
Well, I was doing my master's and I had to do one of my exams in a female-only exam room in the United Arab Emirates. So I definitely
Okay.
also was doing my master's at the same time. Um, I don't know if you're the same, but you look back on your life and in the moment you just do it. And then you look back and you're like, wow, I think migrants have that as well. Like I hear these incredible stories, especially refugee stories. And I'm like, wow, you have to go through 10 countries and end up in Australia. And they go, yeah, but at the time I just was surviving or just doing it for my kids or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not special. I'm exactly the same as anyone. I think that I, had good training. I was able to tell myself that I was going to make a difference in this world. I am a big believer that you get one life, I mean, maybe depending on your religion, you might believe we have many lives, but this is the one that you remember.
Yep.
And I want to get to the end of my life, whenever that happens, hopefully a long time away, and know that I did whatever I could to make the world a little bit better, even 1% better. And so I don't want to sit around and complain about the world. I want to get out there and change it. And I think that means I end up in weird situations like, breaking bread with, Afghan men in the middle of Ramadan. So yeah, I think that I used to get obsessed with planning my career, and I think a lot of people
Okay.
do, especially if you're a migrant, because you go, I've given up so much to start a life somewhere else. I've
Yep.
got family back home who are putting the pressure. Why aren't you a doctor yet? Why aren't you? We've all got
I
the
feel
ethnic
you.
parents. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And you know what? Like, that's important. And I'm a trained leadership coach. Goal setting is important. But sometimes the best thing to do is strip back and go, in the moment, what's the best decision I can make right now that reflects the kind of person I want to be? And so now I think less about what do I want to do when I grow up, and more, who do I want to be? And then
Okay.
every decision, is this moving me closer to who I want to be? And I want to be someone who's living in the world and making a difference. And yeah, that means going to some dangerous places and doing some weird things that other people might not choose to do. But I don't regret any of it.
Yeah, that sounds like you found your purpose. Because when anyone, like the first question that anyone usually asks when they introduce themselves or they're talking to someone, like, what do you do? No one asks, who are you or what's your purpose? And the answer to what do you do is usually your job title. Because that's what you are. Like in this world, what else, how else would you introduce yourself? Like, what do I do? I just like wake up. You can't say that, but you have to, you're associated, and that gives you that sense of what do you call it, identity. And I think you found that purpose over identity, which not many people get to do that. Do you think being a part of the military has helped you do that?
So interesting you say that, because I think the military almost makes it harder, because
Okay.
and you see that when people leave and become veterans, and their whole identity has been in been in the military, you're right, they drill into you how proud you need to be in uniform, and that is so true. But then when you leave and you take that uniform off, a lot of veterans go, oh, well, who am I? And I definitely went through that. Who am I if I'm not, squadron leader, Shamsa, in the Air Force? And now, I'm going through a marriage breakup at the moment. And I go, who am I if I'm not a wife? So there's all these pieces. So I think focusing on, who you are without all the titles is really important. And you're right, it is deep purpose work.
Yep.
And I'm a veteran now, and I'm in a totally different space to where I was when I was a logistics officer full time. But who I am hasn't changed. But what you've touched on is a massive identity piece. And I think some people do that with being a migrant as well. They hold on to that, that's part of their identity. And there's more to you. There's more to you than where you were born, and so who are you when all of that is stripped away? I think it's a really important question to answer.
Yep, true. I agree. As a migrant, there are so many responsibilities. There's so much of identity that you want to carry. You don't want to leave them, because it is a part of you. But at the same time, there is a bigger picture. And I think for migrants, when they leave their country, they don't leave their identity behind. They take their culture along, and they end up becoming global citizens. And I think you also, with the military traveling around, I know you were born and brought up here, but you have traveled around Australia, you've traveled around the world, met people of different cultures, experienced it, experienced different scenarios, and become a global citizen. What does a global citizen mean to you?
Absolutely, that's exactly how I describe myself. I didn't join the military because I'm some sort of, nationalist, defend Australia's borders at all cost person. I love Australia. I love being an Australian. I think we have some of the best opportunities in the world. But what
100%.
I'm more interested in is how do I be a good global citizen? How do I leave this earth safer, greener than when I found it? And so yes, I have loved being in the Defence Force, but it's because I think that plays a part in helping me help the world, not because I have this, nationalistic desire to, defend our borders. So definitely being a global citizen is important to me. It's really important for me to remember my privilege and experience the world. And even before I joined the military, I was in Cambodia when I was 16 a bit younger, 15, making a documentary for a not-for-profit that supported women and children who had escaped from sex trafficking. And it was really
Okay.
important for me to immerse myself in that and speak with these women and these kids and go, wow, I am so grateful. Just by virtue of where I was born in Western Australia, I don't have to go through what these women have gone through. And I'm so, so grateful. And what am I going to do with that privilege? What am I going to do with this opportunity that I've been given? And so I hope that I'm making the most of the privilege that I've been given in my life. Even as a woman of colour, I'm still so much more privileged than if I had been born in Gaza. I'm so
Yep.
grateful for the journey that my father took to Australia. And I don't want to waste that opportunity.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And um, all these people that I'm talking to, especially people like yourself, who are so positive about the work that they've done and the change they've created. I know you said hopefully, but I'm so sure the change that you have created has had a positive impact for the world in a bigger picture. On that, I'm very curious to know what made you transition then?
I think also I would say I do have post-traumatic stress disorder, and I have,
Okay.
Manus Island specifically was very, very challenging. Um, so I think there has been moments in my life where I have not necessarily completely agreed with what I need to do. And I think a good leader is able to assess that, to speak up where they can, and then kind of achieve the mission. Certainly, we didn't handle refugees. We were just building the centre, but
Okay.
there was still a piece there of, is this really what I want to do? And so my transition, kind of started all the way back then, where I thought, I feel like in some ways I'm a pawn on a chessboard, and I can become king of the chessboard, but there's someone still playing the pieces. There's someone else moving the pieces, and that's the government. And
Yep.
I, have to be beholden to the government of the day and what their sort of strategic intent is. And so at the time, I was in Canberra. This was a few years ago.
Okay.
And I was seeing how Senate worked and how the ministry worked, and I knew that if I kept staying in, I would just keep promoting. The golden handcuffs would go on, and I would wake up and be in my 40s, be really high ranking, but always wonder what else. I mean, I joined when I was 17, so
Yeah.
I decided to take a year of leave
Okay.
because I still loved the military, and I always say I wasn't running away from anything. I was running towards something even bigger. And so I took a year off to see what other impact could I have in the world. And so I did what everyone does, and I went to a Big Four consulting firm. But the reason I went to Deloitte is because I thought that would give me the opportunity to try lots of different things, lots of different industries. How can I apply my skills and what I've learned and serve clients in a different way? And so from there, I got involved in Aboriginal consulting, supporting our First Nations practice as the Chief of Staff. Then my final role was as the National Lead of Gender Equity Advisory. So I was a trained gender, peace and security gender advisor in the Air Force. So I was really passionate
Okay.
around women and children in war and international development and gender equity. So that was kind of my transition. And then when I got to the end of that year, I had promoted to director really quickly in the Big Four, which was a really good precedent to set to show that you can leave the military, do no defence consulting, and still promote without needing to kind of, sell Tupperware back to your girlfriends and leverage your networks back in the military. And so I had to make a decision. Do I go back to Air Force or do I keep going on this journey? And it was during the referendum that we had a few years ago.
Yep.
And to be in the Indigenous space during that referendum was really, really eye-opening. And I knew I had to keep going to see if I could be part of history. And so, yeah, I decided to move to part-time after that.
Okay, so that's how you are yet a part of the Air Force working part-time.
So this year I've been studying at the Australian War College,
Okay.
and that is a really interesting time to be studying war and policy and strategy
Yes.
this year, certainly,
Yes, for
especially
sure.
with my cultural background, but
Yep.
also with everything happening. We had the US elections, so there's been so much going on, and to have the opportunity to study that intensively and see what Australia's role is in the region has been really challenging and interesting. So I still do part-time service, and I think I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do that. But now I've moved on to the next chapter of my career.
Okay. You said you moved to the Big Four. Is it easy for veterans to get a job once they transition out of their service?
And this can be really hard. So if you're a soldier in the army and your whole career's been about infantry, you think, oh, the only opportunity I have is to move to private security, in Iraq or
Yep.
something like that. There's so much more the veterans can do, but a lot of the time they're not able to translate their knowledge. But also employers don't necessarily understand what someone can bring. So if you have been a soldier the whole time, yeah, you're really good at weapons, but you're
Yep.
also really good at project management, immediate decision making, high stress, teamwork. So being able to translate that is really important. For me as a logistician, I was in touch with corporate Australia all the time through contract management and things like that. I'd also made sure I did things like sitting on boards, which I'd done for years, or I taught at university part-time as well. So making sure that I was connected to the real world, for want
Yep.
of a better term. But it can certainly be a challenge. There is a stereotype by some employers of what we bring. Like you
Yep.
said at the very beginning of this podcast, is it just you're good at yelling at people? Like, no, there's so much more to that. So I think that there's probably still an education piece for employers, but also for
Yep.
veterans on how to sell themselves. And migrants have this too. How do you translate your experience in your home country into a context that makes sense in Australia? And I have done a lot of work with the Kaleidoscope program through Red Cross, which is about helping helping migrants translate their skills, and that's been amazing watching people who were really senior policy advisors in government. They come to Australia and they can't get anything, they end up
Yep.
cleaning, and I'm like, you have a PhD in
I
it's
know.
and
I've
you're
heard
a
so much of
cleaner.
this.
Yeah, and so I think there's so much more that Australia needs to do around migrants as well. So I think anytime you are moving from one, whether it's the military culture or another actual, culture, how do we, as Australian employers, recognise the amazing opportunity it is to have a veteran, to have a migrant, in your workforce?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this conversation is very important. And if employers are listening to this, this would be so much more helpful because before I spoke to you, I thought Air Force is people who only fly because the name is Air Force. But as you said, you were a part of the logistics team and you did not fly, right?
So, there's 60 plus jobs in the Air Force, only one has been a pilot. There's so much more to it. And we have emerging domains now like cyber, like space. There's so much more to Air Force than just being in a plane.
Yep, that's the whole point of these conversations. Employers, multicultural people, they can know so much more, and it's not just the stereotype that people have in mind when they listen to a term. So this is really interesting to know. You had also mentioned this earlier that you have PTSD from one of your deployment. Does it affect you in your day-to-day career?
And this is another stereotype. There's a stereotype that veterans, we all have PTSD and we're on antidepressants and we, can't, do anything. Like, I've had periods of time where I am on antidepressants and I have needed a lot of therapy for different things. But I'm also in, the C-suite I'm an executive and I'm able to function really well.
Yep.
And I think that this is another stereotype people have about refugees, right? That they come with a lot of trauma that they've had to go through to get here. And how can they possibly, handle a leadership position? And I
Yep.
say, well, that's colonial. Let us decide. Give us self-determination of what we can do. It hasn't held me back. I know the things that kind of trigger me. I can still serve part-time. And I think it's actually been a superpower for me because it's made me very empathetic to other people's mental health journeys. I lost my sister-in-law to suicide a few years ago with her. She had two little babies, and that's helped. My own mental health challenges have helped me understand, her. And if my team come to me and I can see that they're stressed or they're at burnout, I take that really, really seriously. So I think my own mental health journey has actually made me a better leader because I'm more empathetic and attuned to that. And I think, as humans, we're not designed to just sit in a cubicle from 9 to 5 for 50
Yeah.
years of our life. We've evolved, like it's a terrible evolution that we've had. And this,
True.
that there's so much more to life than that. So that also makes me be a leader that takes work-life balance very seriously and encourages my team to rest when they can. And I think that's what the military is really good at. It teaches you to push your team so hard when you have to,
Yep.
but build the trust that they know that you're pushing them hard for a reason, but you'll rest them when you can. And so I have really tried to perfect the art of peaks and troughs in leadership and tempo and work. And Big Four Consulting was good for that too. If we're pushing towards a deadline, my team know, like, yep, Shamsa's going to absolutely ride us, but they know that at the end of it, I'm going to let them rest, create space for that, and defend that to the senior leadership as well. So I think that my mental health journey, I wish it didn't have to happen. It's really annoying,
Yeah.
but I think it's been a bit of a superpower for me.
That's a great way of you using your mental health journey to make it into a superpower. And I was just about to ask you this, but I think you've answered it, but I'm so sure there would be more to add on to this. Is what skills did the Air Force give you that, transitioned or helped you in the corporate world?
I think, leadership, like I said earlier on the podcast, a lot of people are really good at their technical job and they keep getting promoted and suddenly they find themselves in charge of a team and they think, gosh, I'm not prepared for this or I don't want it. I think that I've had to be a leader at all stages of my career. Um, it's taught me to remove ego. It's not about me, and I'm just a cog in a machine. And it's my job to make sure that my cog turns and all the cogs that rely on me can turn. It's given me perspective. When you're standing at the bottom of a massive mountain in Afghanistan, you're looking up at it. There's this beautiful story that the Afghan people in that area tell about the mountains, and they talk about the mountains having eyes, and how for thousands of years, people have killed each other at the bottom of the mountains, but the mountains have just stood tall and watched. And I remember looking at those mountains and hearing that story going, wow, I'm just a person in a moment of time. Like, let's zoom out a little bit. Nothing is that serious. No one is going to die today at work. And so realizing that I'm just a chain in history. So perspective and ego, and looking after my team. I'm really grateful for those lessons that I've learned.
Wow, those are some skills of a great leader, which not a lot of people do have, because I've been in the corporate world as well. And it's difficult to find a great leader and a great manager. I think once the manager, the leader is the right person, it can break or make the team. And I think that's the reason you got promoted in just 10 months to a director. I don't think it is very common in a big four, people getting promoted. You didn't come from a corporate background, but you yet managed to get yourself out there and then getting promoted to a directorship in a big company. These are some great skills, I think, the military or your experiences that you've had over time inculcated in yourself. On that, I wanted to ask you, I know we're talking about stereotypes and different things that are there, but what is a stereotype or a myth that you would like to break that multicultural people have about the military of Australia?
Hope that I've broken it just by you listening to me, but I really want you to challenge stereotypes you might have around the kind of person that would join the military, or what someone who is in the military looks like. And those stereotypes might happen because you've experienced the military in a certain way because of your background. And I'm so sorry if that's been your experience. But I hope that you can see the Australian Defence Force is made of people like me, a Palestinian Christian migrant mum, that's just living her life and genuinely wants the world to be a better place. But is also very pragmatic about that, and knows that there's certain ways that the world works as well. So I hope that challenges the stereotype. And if it's a career goal that anyone has, and they think, oh gosh, I'm not I'm not Aussie enough for it, or I'm not fit enough, or I'm too old, or whatever the stereotype is that you have, I really challenge you just to go give it a go. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic career, especially for your kids as well. Like, they can get their degree paid for. So I just want to challenge that. We still go home to our families at the end of the day, and then we move into the real world afterwards, and we're just like you.
Yep. It sounds amazing to be a part of the military, because there's so much more for it to give. And especially that you just broke the stereotype in my head that I had, that age doesn't matter, gender doesn't matter, your cultural background doesn't matter. It's inclusive for everyone.
Not only does it not matter, but it's actually a strength. Like, if we have a defence force that represents and reflects the culture around it, if we do have different genders, different sexualities, different races, different religions, we're a stronger defence force for that. And so not only does it not matter, but it's necessary.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even in the corporate world or the real world, your cultural background brings so much of a difference, and you, in a way, bring a international experience to a place like Australia, and that's how you grow and expand and become bigger. On that, currently you're working in a non-for-profit organization. Can you share more about it? How did you transition from a corporate, like really cooperative world, to a not-for-profit?
The most corporate thing I could have done. um, I I loved my time at Deloitte. As I promoted up, you do get to the point where you realize it is another pyramid scheme, just like the military. There's people at the top, and it kind of trickles down. And I had to make a decision. I had the opportunity to, pursue partnership, and that's kind of the ultimate goal when you're at consulting. You want to be a partner. You don't realize that actually it's not all that. And I had that opportunity, and at the same time, I'd been approached by someone who shared a job opportunity with me at a charity called Anglicare Western Australia, and it's one of the largest charities in WA outside of aged care and childcare, and it's 200 locations, 123 different services, and they needed someone to come in and bring a corporate lens to their strategy and innovation space. They'd grown really rapidly. They were coming up to new strategy, and there was an opportunity there. And I met with one of my mentors. She's incredible. She used to be a senator in Parliament.
Yep.
And she said, everyone wants to change the world. They want to go to the United Nations in New York, have the selfie for Instagram, but not many people are willing to get their hands dirty in their own backyard. And if you say that you're a servant leader, which is how I like to describe myself, if you say all of that, but then you just take the golden handcuffs of partnership at a Big Four, are you really being true to your values? You have an opportunity to actually go and make a difference where you live. And I thought, wow, that's absolutely humbled me. You're right. So I took the chance to come across to the not-for-profit. So I'm in the executive team. I'm the youngest by about 15 years. And I'm not from the sector. Most people in the executive in these kind of roles are social workers or they're youth workers. And at first I felt a bit of imposter syndrome, like, gosh, what do I have to add? But then I realized the fact that I don't have the learned behaviours and experiences that you would have in that sector. It's actually why they want me. They want me to bring that totally different lens to go, why are we doing that? Why does it need to look like that? And I think it's the same for migrants and for veterans in general. We do bring a totally different lens, and we can challenge the cultural norms that are happening in the organisation. So I have this incredible team. Once again, they're all technical experts. They've all got their PhDs in social impact and they've been in the space forever. I don't have any of that. So once again, I find myself almost full circle back to when I was, a little officer and I didn't know anything about logistics and warehousing. I don't know much about, advocacy and government relations and, innovation in the not-for-profit space. But I had to learn really quickly. I've had an incredible team, and they don't need me to know that. They need me to lead them and help them grow. And so I've been there, for a couple of years, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. It's made me a better executive. It's made me a better citizen. And I'm so grateful to people who work in the care sector, and a lot of migrants work in the care sector.
Yes.
Whether they're wiping bottoms in an aged care home, or whether they're cooking meals for people with disability. Like, it's just that work is so important. It holds Australia up. If the care sector wasn't here, Australia wouldn't be able to run the way it does. So if you're listening and you're in the social services sector, thank you for doing the jobs that are really hard physically, really hard emotionally. You don't get paid very well. You work your butt off. You're making a massive difference to this nation, and we're so grateful for you.
It is their service to Australia, in a way.
That's right.
My last question actually is, as a veteran, what would you like to tell multicultural communities hearing this podcast and hearing about your journey from a person serving Australia in the most literal way and then now serving Australia in a different way?
Oh, I really like that question. I want the listeners to know that a few things, that the military is a viable career choice. If you're an Australian citizen, go for it. I want you to realise that Australia is so grateful that you've chosen to call us home. And I want you to know that there's people who look and think like you in our Defence Force every day. I want you to remember that we have one life. You have gone on this massive journey to end up here in Australia. I'm so proud of you for doing that. And now it's okay. Well, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with this choice? And sometimes it's just, I'm going to survive and get money to send back home, and that's all I can do. And you know what? That is enough. That is more than enough. Not everyone has to have this incredible over-the-top story. Mine's a little bit too dramatic sometimes.
Love it.
But just by being here, you've survived. And so really, really grateful that you've chosen to call Australia home. And I'm so proud to live in this country with you. And I hope that you've learned something about the military of this nation. And maybe it sparks some ideas that you can take into your current job, your future jobs, or just your life.
Yep. I'm so sure people have taken a lot back, and especially the leadership skills that you've spoken about. These are skills that people can use in their everyday lives. And it is necessary to be a good leader. You need to have these skills. So I'm just going to say something. I'm going to say thank you, Samsha. It was beautiful hearing your journey. Before we end, I actually want to ask one question. Are there some military slangs that you can teach us?
Ooh. Um, well, we have a lot of Australiana kind of slangs, I'm sure that a lot of migrants had to learn about monos and arvos and all that kind of thing. Um, I don't know. I think that what we have in the military is everyone has a nickname, which is the same as Australian culture. So everyone gets
Okay.
O added to their nickname. So definitely, I don't know what yours would be because Sari, you can't really add an O to it, like me as well. But no, I don't really have a very good answer for that question. I'll have to,
That's
yeah.
fine. I was like, maybe there could be something in the military that we don't know about, and that'd be something fun and interesting to learn about it. Now, that's it. Thank you so much, Amsha, for sharing your journey with us in this podcast in with the Vassal Foundation. And I'm so glad that I could interview you from Humans of Australia. It's been a pleasure, and I hope the listeners, if you're listening, you had an immense understanding of what the Air Force is and what all it can do for you, and what a veteran means, and how they can change your life. And that's a wrap.